afternoon? Are we pumped?
Yes.
It's Sabbath and we're at church. Are we pumped?
Yes.
So, thank you guys again for letting me come up here one last time before I take off to school. And thank you guys just for being a community for the time that we've been here. We're super grateful, my family and I. So, are you ready?
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Bring it.
So, this week, I just love how God works, because this week I was listening to a podcast by a man named Jay Shetty. I don't know if any of you have heard of him. He was talking about how we need to learn the emotional skills that we didn't really learn when we were growing up from our families, friends, parents. And it was so interesting because leading up to this week, Josh was like, hey, do you know what you're going to preach about? And I was like, no, not yet. Leading up to the following weeks, hey, do you know what you're going to preach about yet? Just so I have an idea. And I was like, yeah, I don't know yet. Up until last week when I was on the phone with a friend. She was going through like these relational issues with her significant other, and all I hear is like someone sobbing on the other end saying, I don't want to repeat the cycle. I don't want to be like my parents. I mean, coming from a home that wasn't exactly put together, I could understand and I could feel that. And growing up, knowing that it's not easy having to make these choices of what road we're going to go down based on the cards that we were given. Yeah. But like Josh said last week, we work with what we have. So the way that these things come about and that kind of come up and taunt us, that make us feel this feeling that we don't want to feel, and remind us of those scenarios that went on when we were young or when we're old or as we grow, it's something called trauma. Trauma is something that we don't talk about. It's not like a conversation starter on a first date.
Come on.
Or it shouldn't be. But the slogan that we're going on today and the main thing that we're going to be talking about is this. Holding on to labels assigned by man is self-incarceration.
Wow.
So let me break it down. Holding on to labels given to you by people here on earth is you being stuck. Is you not being able to move forward. It's you holding yourself back from your purpose, your potential, and what God has planned for you. Because if you're walking down the steps that your family or your parents put in front of you, you're walking their journey, not yours. So question, have you ever heard of the term intergenerational trauma? No, it's a little more psychology, but intergenerational trauma is basically trauma that's transferred from generation of trauma survivors to the second and further generation of their offspring.
Wow.
So example, say you grew up and one of your parents, let's say I'm a girl, so my mother, married someone who was an addict. Addictive traits, whether it was work, substance, alcohol, whatever. So growing up, that's all I saw, that's all you see. So what else are you going to think life is? If there's no disruption in the cycle, then you're going to grow and you're going to look for someone with the same traits. Consciously or subconsciously, either way, you're going to grow with someone who's just like mom, who's just like dad. And there's no disruption in the cycle, so there's no way of getting out of it. When we go through these situations and these choices in life saying, do I want to follow this path or do I want to follow my own or follow God's? It's a tough choice to make. But I believe that there's three choices you can make. There's three. So the first one I like to say is we run to it. We run along with it. We're like, you know what? Like, it's just easier. It's embedded in my DNA. I already believe it about myself. My grandfather went through it. My father went through it, so I have to go through it. It's almost as if we have this predestined future that's already put for us that we didn't choose. So, don't you love how the Bible has a story for everything that you're going through. You pick something, and there's a story in the Bible about it. So for this one, it's Mary. You know Mary Magdalene, she was a very promiscuous woman. She was someone who went out and she was out there. And it's kind of different thinking about that time and this time. I mean, People get shamed in this day, but I could only imagine back then. So you see, Mary Magdalene chose God. She followed God. But God even says, even while she was following him, he still had to cast out her demon 7 times. 7 times he casted out her demon. That's a lot of time. If that doesn't show God's persistence, then I don't know what does. And I think it also shows that a walk with God isn't easy. A walk with God doesn't mean that everything's going to be rainbows and butterflies and you're just going to keep going. That's not what it means. It means that sometimes you are going to go back to that life. And I'm sure it was hard for her. She was looking for love. She was looking for affection. She was looking to be heard, to be felt safe. But she was looking for it in the wrong places. Moving on. Number 2. We close off that part of ourselves as if it never happened. We close off that part, so you know what? I went through this traumatic thing when I was little, so I'm going to act like it's not there and move on with my life and just drown it out. We do that as well. In another story, Moses. And the thing is, you're probably telling me, Destiny, you're 18. You don't know what that means. You have your whole life ahead of you. I'm older. I don't have that much time. I'm limited. But Moses was a man who was, you know the story, he was born a king. He was actually a Hebrew. And then he ended up growing up and he killed an Egyptian. He killed an Egyptian, and because of his shame, his hurt, and everything that he felt, he knew that he wasn't supposed to do that. He ran. He ran, and he didn't stop running. He ran for 40 years. He ran for 40 years. So Moses ran for 40 years, and you're telling me that you've been running from your issue for 5? I think he wins. So Moses went to go live with his father-in-law. He was a Midianite. And he was living there with him, acting as if that part of my life, I drowned it out, it didn't happen, I'm over it. But God called him to go back to the exact place that he was running from. Not only did he call him to go back to the exact place, he told him, you're going to go to the exact place, I'm going to deliver you, and I'm going to have you deliver my people. It wasn't just about Moses, and I think sometimes it happens that way, you know? When we go through that storm and we actually fight our way through it, and we end up seeing people at the end who also benefited from it. So, we can't let those 10 years of wrongdoing or issues or traumas imprison us for the next 40. We can't let that bad marriage hold you back from ever feeling love again, or that bad experience holding you captive from your life. Then there's 3. You get up, you walk through it, and you get through it. You get up, you walk through it, and you get through it. This reminds me of, it's a very popular, one of my favorite Psalms, Psalms 23. He says, David wrote, David's head was on the chopping block at this time. And he said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I don't know if that sounds good to you. The valley of the shadow of death seems scary. It seems ugly. And it's somewhere that I don't want to be. I've never heard someone say, you know what, I'm in this valley, so I think I'm going to stay here for a little bit. Stop and smell the dirt. No one says that. But you know the following line says, I will not fear because you're with me. Is that not a beautiful promise? I mean, he's saying, yeah, you're going to go through the gutters, you're going to walk through the valley, this scary, dark place that you don't know if you're going to make it out of, but I do. And I'm telling you that you don't have to walk through it alone. And if you go down even more in the psalm, he says, surely goodness and mercy shall follow you, shall comfort you, shall chase you. The direct translation from what it was written until now is chase you. Surely mercy and goodness will chase you all the days of your life, and you will dwell in the house with God forever. This really reminds me of my story, of me. See, a lot of you guys don't really know me that well, but I'm going to get a little personal today. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So growing up, I lived in a family, in a household, big family. You can see them, they're all over there. And it was all of us. One big house, 3 older brothers, mom and dad. We were always that picture-perfect family, you know, and like, you were like, oh my gosh, they're so put together. It always seems like that from the outside, doesn't it? But it's what happened behind closed doors is what people didn't see. You see, growing up, I had loving family and I had everything I could ever want and needed. But it's hard when you struggle, when someone in your family struggles with addiction. It's a struggle when you don't know what the mood that person is going to be in when they come home. You don't know how everything's going to be handled because dinner wasn't made the right way. You don't know what the outcome is going to be. And it's hard, and it's traumatizing, and it sucks. No one said that your journey has to be easier, it has to be hard enough for you to brag about. That's not what it is. But growing up, it wasn't easy. It's not easy trying to talk to someone, nodding in and out because they're not fully there. It's not easy trying to get people to stop yelling at each other and just asking for something to make it stop. Going to your room, crying, hearing the yelling over the shower, the loud shower, yeah. It's hard, and it's not easy. But you know what? I'm not ashamed. And you know what? Just because that's embedded in my life, just because that storyline was followed from other people in my life, doesn't mean that I'm destined for the same. Doesn't mean that I have to choose the same. Just because my father was an alcoholic doesn't mean I have to be.
Amen.
That's not my story. But you know what? I can either run to it, I can run away from it, or I can walk through it. And you know what? That's a tough decision to handle at 10 years old. That's a tough decision to go through as a little girl. You see, there's crossroads, and we have a choice, and we don't know which one is which at that young of an age. But you see, the label that was put on me, I could have picked it up and worn it. All of you, whatever was predestined for you, you could have picked it up and worn it because that's the easiest thing to do. It's harder to fight it. It's harder to walk through it. As we go on, we're going to look at a scripture from Paul. And when God called on my heart and he pulled me and he told me what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life, you can imagine I was terrified. Talk in front of people? Talk about myself? Talk about my story? Talk about God? I felt shame. I felt like I couldn't. And I felt like, no, that's not what I'm supposed to do. But you know what? I read a scripture this week that Josh actually sent me, and it hit me right in that space when it took me back to that space before I said yes to God. And it says this: last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared also to me, for I am the least of the apostles, unfit to be called an apostle. You think that with my background and who I am, I was like, yeah, I'm perfectly fit to be a pastor. No. But it's not even about that. It's not even about me. It's about all of us feeling that we're not even worthy. That we've been running from this issue for so long that God doesn't even see us anymore. It's the feeling that, you know what, I just had a terrible week. I felt so far away from God. I don't even feel like I can be in his house right now. I don't want to be around his people because I'm not worthy. You see, Paul keeps going and he says, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. I am what I am. And this grace towards me has not been in vain. On the contrary, I work harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Family, do you think that any of us could have got through anything that we went through without the grace of God? Without God's trail following us, without the Holy Spirit in us? You know what? I could have been that person, but I'm not. I could have chose the wrong path, but I'm not. You could have chose that life. You could have chose to walk in the same footsteps. You could have chose to take the easy route. But you're here in church. He says, though it was not I, but the grace of God that was with me. Whether it was I or they, we proclaimed, and so you have come to believe. This hits. This hits me because of this. Because Paul could have used all the things that he went through, being persecuted by the church, literally a murderer. He could have picked up that label and was like, you know what, everyone's calling me a murderer, I'm a murderer. Because it's the easy thing to do. But limitations put on by us and by God, or put on by us, God trumps. Limitations that are self-imposed, which are all limitations, because we don't choose to limit ourselves unless we allow it to happen. We are limitless through God. We are unchained through God. But when we start to believe the labels and the things that man puts on us, we are imprisoning ourselves in living in captivity of our past. Holding on to labels assigned by man is self-incarceration. And you see, we all have our before and afters. It's like those weight losses that you see on TV. They're like, oh, before, and then this was after. We all have that. It might not be with weight, but it's with anything else. We have who we were and we have who we are. We have our was and we have our ands. But we can't allow our insecurities channeled by our traumas to define our future. So I'm going to challenge you to do this, to reflect on your life, reflect on your traumas that you've kept hidden away because you now have kids, because you don't have the time to worry about that anymore. It's adult life, it's jobs, it's kids, it's everything that you have to do from a 9 to 5 or a daily basis. But our mind is so powerful that it doesn't just remind us to remember milk before we go home. It also has ways of reminding us of our traumas, of our issues, of our insecurities, and the littlest things. We need to learn to live from our power and not from our brokenness. Don't get me wrong, you are who you are and I am who I am because of our brokenness, but we didn't stay in the brokenness. We didn't live in the brokenness. We got up, we picked up our pain, God picked us up, and He's pushing us, and He's pushing us to live from power, to use it as leverage, not as limitation. If you look on the little flyer that you have, the one with the title on it, if you see it says, I am is greater than I was. I am, who I am today is greater than who I was yesterday. Who I am today is greater than who I was 3 years ago. If you look at the symbol, the greater than symbol, the bridge from I was to I am is the renewing and the power of Jesus Christ. See, you can take who you were and you can take it to God. Because you know what? God doesn't see you as that. You know what God sees you as? You say, I'm an abusive father. And God says, but you are a child of God. You say, I was an addict. I am an addict, but you are a child of God. I'm a bad person. I can't do this. I'm broken. I'm hopeless. I'm this. But you know what? You are a child of God. And that trumps any label that anyone puts on you, that you put on yourself, or that has been predestined for you. And there's nothing that anyone can do to change that. You live as a child of the Most High. You live as a child of God. If that's not worth anything, then I don't know what is. That is like mind-blowing to me. I can't even wrap my head around it. Growing up without a father, knowing that I have one that's greater than anyone's here on earth is mind-boggling. And without that hope, I don't know where I'd be. You see, we need to know which one trumps the other one. We need to know if who I was is greater than who I am. Because you know what? I'm going to point something out. What do we call God? The great I am. The great I am. Our God is so generous that he literally gives us his identity. He gives us him. He says, you know what? I know you're lost. I know you're broken. I know you're hopeless. But you know what? Here is me. He says that he is living in us.
Yeah.
He is living in us. So we need to learn how to channel that and feel God's presence around us because he is omnipresent.
Yeah.
Omnipresent is when he is everywhere. Whether you are doing bad things, whether you are doing great things, whether you are sleeping on the couch, he's there. It's up to us to acknowledge that. It's up to us to acknowledge his presence. He gives us his identity. And that's who we are first. We are everything else after. And he says, you know what? Yeah, you were that person. You're not that person anymore. And you know what? Like Mary Magdalene, you can go and pick that demon up anytime you want, but you know what? I'm still going to cast it out of you. You can go and you can choose that life as many times as you want, but you know what? I'm still here. I still love you. And the second that you reach your hand out, I will be there to catch you. See, we may feel like we're falling sometimes when we slide back into those ways, but God has actually lessened the fall so much more. And he has protected you so much that a tiny drop feels like you just got destroyed. We have a God who is fighting for us every day, saying, you know what? I don't care that you were that person. He washes us so clean that he literally, he says that he forgets what that was before, that sin that we had before, because that's not worth who you are. He says that in this day, there's so much going on, but you know what? I made you. You say, God, but I can't do it myself. I can't change, I can't do this. He says, you don't have to. Not only did I send you a community, I sent you a family, I sent you this, I sent you that, and if you feel that you can't turn to any of those people, you still have your Heavenly Father. Family, I just encourage you, and I want to go back to this, live from your power and not from your brokenness. We all have what people like to call our sob stories. They're not sob stories. They're stories of empowerment. They're stories of victory. They're stories of our life. And if we say that those are sob stories, then we're making our life a joke. Our life is not a joke. It was given to us by Jesus Christ, and it was ordained for greatness.
Amen.
Who you were is not who you are. Living a life of Jesus Christ is never easy. It's never roses and petals, and we know that. And we find it so much easier to just put it off and to put it off, because what are we going to do? The struggle seems harder when you're following God, because you feel like he should be there more than what he is when you're not rolling with him. Is that true? Sometimes we almost point at God and we're like, why did you let this happen to me? I'm following you now, aren't you happy? That's not the battle. It's you going through things. It's like if we look at anyone in the Bible, did they be like, you know what, God? It's harder walking with you, so I'm going to walk away. Don't get me wrong, people did. But look at the ones who did walk with him. Look at the ones who did keep his truth, keep his name, and not let the fact that they were a drunk, a murderer, a prostitute, a promiscuous woman define the fact that they are followers, disciples, and people of Jesus Christ. I am a child of God. I was that person.
Amen.
Thank you guys.